The obsidian walls of the Grand Praetorian Chamber shimmered, reflecting the flickering holographic projections that dominated the space. Within, the Council of Xylar, the ruling body of the Krill Dominion, sat in silent judgment. Their multifaceted eyes, each a kaleidoscope of shifting colors, fixated on the swirling vortex of images before them. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the weight of 1,000 star systems pressing down upon their scaled shoulders. The footage recovered from a derelict scout vessel depicted a battle, a brutal, efficient clash of unknown entities. The attackers, a swarm of sleek metallic ships, moved with a predatory grace, their weapons leaving trails of incandescent energy that tore through the void. The defenders, identified only as the Vorn, a species the Krill had long considered a minor annoyance, were swiftly overwhelmed. The destruction was comprehensive, the annihilation absolute. The silence in the chamber was broken only by the low hum of the holographic projector and the rhythmic rasp of the Grand Praetor's respirators. Grand Praetor Xylar, his massive form silhouetted against the swirling carnage, finally spoke, his voice a gravelly rumble that echoed through the chamber. The Vorn, a species with whom we maintain tenuous trade agreements, reduced to cosmic dust within a solar cycle. And by whom? His multifaceted eyes narrowed, scanning the council. The other members shifted uneasily, their internal anxieties made visible by the subtle changes in their bioluminescent markings. Fear, a cold and unwelcome guest, had taken root within the heart of the Dominion. The attackers, continued Xylar, are unknown. Their technology surpasses anything we have encountered, their tactics ruthless, and their silence unnerving. He paused, the holographic image freezing on a moment of utter destruction, a visual echo of an unknown terror. Praetor Lyra, her slender form contrasting with Xylar's bulk, stepped forward. The scout vessel's sensors barely registered their signatures, Praetor. They seemed to materialize from nowhere, strike with devastating force, and then vanish. We have no frame of reference, no understanding of their origins or their intentions. This is a void threat, something unseen, something unknown. Her voice betrayed a tremor, a chink in the armor of her practiced composure. Around the council, the bioluminescent patterns on the Krill's exoskeletons were now displaying colors of uncertainty and fear. The air thickened with dread. Another member, a veteran military leader, Praetor Zarthus, rumbled, "We should mobilize the fleet, prepare for war. We cannot allow this thing asterisk to advance into Krill space." His voice, though resolute, lacked conviction. The very notion of war against an enemy so utterly unknown sent a wave of icy dread through the seasoned warrior. They knew the cost of war, they knew the sacrifices required to protect the Dominion. But facing an unseen, incomprehensible enemy was something entirely different. "Mobilization against an unknown foe is a gamble," countered Praetor Lyra. "We know nothing of their capabilities, their numbers, their weaknesses. A preemptive strike could be disastrous." Her argument, though logical, was met with murmurs of dissent. The weight of responsibility, the protection of the Dominion, demanded action, regardless of the potential consequences. The council was torn. On one side stood the proponents of aggressive defense, on the other the cautious voices of diplomacy and restraint. Both sides, however, were united by one underlying fear, the fear of the unknown. Xylar raised a clawed hand, silencing the debate. "We will not act impulsively. We will gather all available data, analyze their behavior, and attempt to understand their intentions. Deploy the most advanced sensor arrays. Activate the deep space probes. We will learn what we can about this threat." His voice was firm, yet beneath the command, a flicker of vulnerability could be seen in the depths of his multifaceted eyes. The Krill, for all their technological prowess and military might, were facing an enemy that transcended their understanding, an enigma that threatened to shatter the foundations of their interstellar empire. And in the face of such a terrifying unknown, fear was not merely a psychological reaction, it was a strategic imperative. The weeks that followed were a blur of frenetic activity. The Krill Empire, a vast network of interconnected star systems, mobilized its resources. Sensor arrays were recalibrated, deep space probes were dispatched, and the most brilliant minds of the Dominion were assembled to decipher the secrets of the unknown enemy. The battle footage, the only tangible evidence of the threat, was dissected, analyzed, and replayed countless times. The Krill scientists, engineers, and strategists, driven by a mixture of fear and intellectual curiosity, worked tirelessly, desperate to understand the nature of the entity that had so ruthlessly annihilated the Vorn. The data that began to trickle in was fragmented and inconclusive. The attacking ships seemed to defy the known laws of physics, their movements erratic, their energy signatures inconsistent. Their weapons, based on the incomplete readings, appeared to be far more powerful than anything the Krill had encountered. Their methods were cold and efficient, their tactics brutally effective. The more the Krill learned, the less they understood. Each piece of information, each analysis of the attack, only deepened the mystery and intensified the sense of dread. A breakthrough, or what they initially believed to be one, came when a long-range sensor array picked up a faint energy signature emanating from the direction of the Vorn system. This, if they were to believe their readings, was the origin point of the attacks, the place where the unseen aggressors first manifested. The council reconvened, the tension in the Grand Praetorian chamber now almost unbearable. "The sensor readings are consistent," reported Praetor Zara, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with excitement. "A spatial anomaly highly localized, emitting a unique energy signature. It is without a doubt the origin point of the attackers." She paused, her voice tinged with a nervous excitement. "We believe we can pinpoint their location, Praetor. We can finally understand our enemy." Xyler, his face a mask of careful neutrality, listened intently. The potential for a strategic advantage was tantalizing, but the Krill had learned to fear such opportunities. "Prepare a reconnaissance vessel," he ordered. "A stealth ship, a small crew. We will observe, not engage. We will gather information. This time we will not be caught off guard." The reconnaissance vessel, the Shadow Serpent Asterisk, a sleek and deadly ship equipped with state-of-the-art stealth technology, slipped silently through the void towards the Vorn system. The crew, a hand-picked team of specialists led by Captain Val, a seasoned veteran of countless covert operations, knew the risks. They understood the gravity of their mission. They were sent not to fight, but to witness, to observe, to understand. Their survival, and perhaps the survival of the entire Dominion, depended on their ability to gather information without being detected. As the Asterisk Shadow Serpent approached the Vorn system, the tension within the vessel was palpable. The crew, a mix of seasoned veterans and eager young scientists, worked in silent efficiency, their eyes fixed on the sensor readings and holographic displays. The closer they got, the more complex the readings became. The spatial anomaly, the source of all the Krill's fear and uncertainty, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy, a silent hum that vibrated through the very fabric of space-time. Finally, they arrived at the point of origin. The anomaly manifested as a vast, swirling distortion of space, a vortex of energy that seemed to consume everything around it. Around its perimeter, they detected the remnants of the Vorn civilization, the shattered husks of their ships, the scattered debris of their shattered world. The Krill crew watched in hushed silence, the evidence of annihilation, an unsettling testament to the power of the unseen enemy. And then, from the depths of the anomaly, something emerged. Not a ship, not a weapon, but a signal. A focused, coherent, undeniably artificial signal. The Asterisk Shadow Serpent crew's initial reaction was one of confusion. The signal was unlike anything they'd encountered. It was complex, yet strangely familiar, as if they had a distant memory of its fundamental building blocks. It didn't speak any language the Krill knew of, yet it communicated a sense of order. The signal's transmission was targeted, specifically directed towards a specific point in space. It was a message, and after a moment of intense debate, Captain Val made the call. They would attempt to decode it. Back in the Grand Praetorian chamber, the Council of Xyler waited, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic rasp of the Grand Praetor's respirators. They hadn't heard from the Shadow Serpent in days. The uncertainty, the fear, were at a boiling point. The fate of the Krill Dominion, they knew, rested in the hands of the vessel and its crew. Suddenly, a holographic projection flickered to life, displaying a heavily distorted image of Captain Val and the interior of the Shadow Serpent Asterisk. Her image was static, her voice crackling with static. "Praetor, we have found something, a signal from the anomaly." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the council in stunned silence. Then, slowly, the holographic projection shifted, displaying a series of complex symbols, patterns, and mathematical equations. It was the decoded message, the answer to the Krill's questions, the key to understanding the threat that loomed over their empire. The initial translation attempts were chaotic. The signal defied conventional analysis. The language was unlike anything in their database, but with each passing cycle, the translation began to take shape. And as the message slowly began to coalesce, a sense of dawning horror swept through the chamber. The symbols, the patterns, the mathematical equations, all were pieces of an ancient and terrifying history. The message wasn't from the attackers. It was a warning, a desperate cry for help, an account of a cosmic horror that had ravaged a civilization and was now coming toward the Krill's galaxy. The source of the attacks, they now knew, was not a sentient species, not a hostile empire, but a force of pure destruction, a parasitic entity that consumed entire galaxies. The entity, known only as the Voidborn, traveled through the voids between realities, consuming all in its path. and the message ominously revealed they were close, very close. The destruction of the Vorn was merely a prelude. The Krill Dominion was in its path. The implications of the message were staggering. The Krill had prepared for war, but they had prepared for the wrong war against the wrong enemy. They had assumed a rational opponent, but they were facing a force of pure, primal chaos. And even more chillingly, the warning ended with the information that the attackers would be here soon. The image cut out, leaving the council to contemplate the chilling truth the message had conveyed. Grand Praetor Xyler, his massive form etched with a new, terrifying gravity, looked at the council. He had been preparing for war, for politics, for conflict. He had been prepared to fight for the survival of the Krill Dominion. But how could they fight something they didn't even understand? A force so great that it had wiped out a civilization. "We have miscalculated," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the Grand Praetorian chamber. He paused and looked upon each member of the council, his multiple eyes searching their faces. He added, "The Vorn were not victims, they were warnings." The Council of Xyler had been plunged into a new crisis. They had believed themselves to be the most advanced species in the galaxy, but they now understood that their mastery of technology, their military might, their political intrigue were all futile against the cosmic horror that threatened to consume them. The Dominion needed allies quickly if it was to survive. It needed someone who understood this new threat. They needed a miracle. And as if in answer to their unspoken plea, a new signal emerged from the chaos. The signal was faint, yet unmistakable. A message not from the Voidborn, not from the Vorn, but from a source they did not recognize. From the direction of a small star system on the far side of the galaxy. A signal that seemed to be speaking to the Krill specifically. It wasn't a warning or a threat, but a request, an invitation, an offer of help. The signal was strange, and as they deciphered it, even stranger, for it came from a species they had never encountered, humans. The initial reception of the human signal was one of bewilderment. Who were these beings? How did they know of the Krill? And why would they offer help in a situation that seemed utterly hopeless? The Council of Xyler, accustomed to complex political machinations and interstellar rivalries, found themselves baffled by the simplicity, the directness, and the overwhelming warmth of the human message. The message began with a simple greeting, followed by a surprisingly clear explanation of the situation. The humans, it turned out, had been monitoring the galaxy for centuries, watching the rise and fall of civilizations, observing the slow encroachment of the Voidborn. They knew the Krill, they knew of their strengths, and they knew of their weaknesses. The humans offered a solution, a strategy, a means of combating the Voidborn, a way to survive against insurmountable odds. The Krill, who had been expecting a complex diplomatic dance, were surprised by the directness of their request. "We want to help. Let us work together. Let us fight this threat together." Praetor Lyra, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak. "This is a trap. It has to be." She paused, her eyes searching the holographic representation of the human signal. "We have no frame of reference for their motivations. They are an unknown variable. They could be attempting to deceive us, to manipulate us. We must approach with caution." Praetor Zarthus, the veteran military leader, voiced a different perspective. "We are facing an enemy that is beyond our comprehension. We are outmatched. We need allies, and the humans have proven they know something of the Voidborn. We must listen to what they have to say." He paused, his tone less confrontational than usual. "And let us be frank, we have little to lose. Survival trumps risk." Grand Praetor Xyler considered both arguments, as well as the deeper implications. The situation called for courage, but also for caution. They would have to tread carefully, but they would have to trust to some degree. In the face of a cosmic threat, perhaps the most dangerous thing of all was isolation. "We will respond to their message," he decided. "We will send a delegation, a diplomatic mission. We will learn what we can about these humans. We will gauge their intentions, and we will see if their offer of help is genuine." He paused, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the holographic image of the human signal. "We will also prepare for the worst." The delegation, comprising Praetor Lyra, Praetor Zarthus, and a team of the Krill's most brilliant scientists, engineers, and diplomats, boarded the asterisk Shadow Serpent and set course for the coordinates provided by the humans. The journey was long, and the Krill, accustomed to the efficiency of hyperspace travel, found themselves increasingly intrigued by the human method, a slower form of transit that somehow managed to be more efficient than they initially predicted. Their curiosity was further piqued by the knowledge that the humans' system was at the edge of the galaxy, the location of the greatest threat, and the place they could learn how to survive. The approach to the human homeworld was filled with a sense of wonder. The humans, unlike the Krill, did not reside in a vast, sprawling empire. They resided on a single, vibrant, and incredibly diverse planet. As the asterisk Shadow Serpent emerged from its travel route, The delegation was met by a dazzling display of technology, a defense array unlike anything the Krill had ever encountered. It was not overtly aggressive, but it was omnipresent, a silent testament to the humans' willingness to defend their home. The delegation was greeted by a welcoming committee of humans, a group of scientists, diplomats, and military personnel who were surprisingly not at all what the Krill had expected. They were physically small, fragile-looking beings, with soft skin, expressive faces, and an unnerving level of directness. They spoke in a language that, while initially incomprehensible, was quickly translated by the human universal translator. Their mannerisms were strange, their customs unfamiliar, and their technology, while advanced, was remarkably different from the Krill's. Yet in their eyes, the Krill saw a sincerity, a genuine desire to help. The humans, led by a woman named Dr. Aris Thorne, greeted the Krill delegation with a mixture of warmth and professionalism. Their first interactions were filled with cultural exchange. The Krill, accustomed to the rigid protocols of interstellar diplomacy, were surprised by the informality, the curiosity, and the willingness of the humans to share their knowledge. The humans, in turn, were fascinated by the Krill, by their history, their technology, and their perspective on the universe. The Krill, who had approached the humans with suspicion and caution, found themselves increasingly impressed by their hosts. The humans were not arrogant, not power-hungry, not deceitful. They were instead pragmatic, resourceful, and surprisingly ethical. They spoke openly about their past mistakes, their current challenges, and their hopes for the future. They showed the Krill their technology, their history, and their culture not as a display of power, but as an invitation to understand. Dr. Thorne, a brilliant scientist with a calm and unflappable demeanor, explained the human approach to the void-born threat. They did not intend to wage all-out war. They didn't intend to confront the enemy directly, but to manipulate the void-born's weaknesses. They intended to cut it off from its energy source, to starve it out. This was a strategy, not of destruction, but of containment. It was a strategy based on a deep understanding of the enemy's nature. The human plan was based on a combination of advanced technology, strategic deployment, and a profound understanding of the laws of physics. They would use a series of massive energy fields, constructed in strategic locations throughout the galaxy, to disrupt the Voidborn's ability to navigate the voids between realities. They would also use a series of powerful weapons to target the Voidborn's core energy source, the places where it draws its power. They would work with the Krill to build these installations and deploy these weapons. They had spent years studying and preparing. They knew what was coming and were ready. The Krill, after a period of deep and careful consideration, agreed to the humans' plan. They agreed to work together. They agreed to fight. The agreement was sealed not in the formal language of interstellar diplomacy, but with a shared understanding, a mutual respect, and a genuine desire to survive. The Krill, who had initially underestimated the humans, had come to realize that they were, in fact, incredibly dangerous. Not in the way of a warmongering empire, but in the way of a brilliant, determined species that was willing to sacrifice everything to protect the galaxy. The combined Krill and human forces prepared for war. The Krill, with their vast fleets and their mastery of hyperspace travel, would provide the firepower and the strategic reach. The humans, with their ingenuity, their technological prowess, and their understanding of the enemy, would provide the guiding hand. The alliance was a true partnership, a symphony of different skills and perspectives, a testament to the power of unity. The first confrontation with the Voidborn was brutal. The creatures, drawn to the combined Krill and human forces, attacked with relentless fury. They swarmed the battlefields, their tendrils of energy tearing through ships, their hunger insatiable. The Krill and the humans, however, were prepared. The energy fields, designed by the humans, disrupted the Voidborn's movement. Their weapons, developed with a combined effort, were able to deal damage to the enemy. The battle raged across the galaxy, a conflict between two forces that were completely at odds with each other, an unstoppable force and an immovable object. The humans, in their strategic genius, made an unexpected move. The energy fields were not designed merely to contain the Voidborn, but to draw them into a single location. Place where the humans had built a superweapon, a device capable of unleashing a concentrated blast of energy at the heart of the enemy. The Krill, seeing the danger, knew what had to be done. They positioned their fleets to protect the humans. The humans, with their calm, unflappable demeanor, prepared to activate the weapon. Dr. Thorne, standing beside the device, looked at Praetor Lyra, her eyes meeting the Krill's. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a quiet determination. We have to do this. We have to make this work. The weapon was activated. A beam of focused energy, like a river of pure light, surged into the heart of the Voidborn swarm, ripping through the creatures with devastating force. The battlefield was lit by a blinding flash of energy. The Voidborn shrieked, their essence contorting in the face of the assault. For a moment it seemed as if the battle was won, that the threat was defeated. But the Voidborn were not so easily vanquished. The creatures, though damaged, though weakened, lashed out in their final moments. They targeted the weapon, the source of the human power. They targeted the Krill and the humans. They had been drawn into a trap and were ready to retaliate. The Krill and human forces fought with a renewed ferocity, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that their victory depended on their actions. Their sacrifice was almost certain, but their mission was vital. As the battle continued to rage, the Krill delegation in the Shadow Serpent Asterisk attempted to evacuate as many ships as they could. Praetor Lyra, observing the battle from the ship, was struck with awe as she viewed the unfolding combat. Their forces combined were pushing the enemy back, even as the Voidborn retaliated with ever greater fury. It was a brutal conflict, a terrible sacrifice, a desperate act of heroism. The Krill, who had once viewed the humans with suspicion, with caution, had come to appreciate their unwavering courage, their unwavering commitment to their allies. They had witnessed the humans' strategic brilliance, their willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. And now, as they fought side by side against the Voidborn, the Krill knew that they were not just allies. They were comrades. The final moments of the battle were a blur of explosions, of screaming engines, and the desperate cries of the dying. The Voidborn, though damaged, though weakened, had managed to breach the human defenses. They targeted the weapon. They targeted the humans. They turned their sight upon the Krill. It was the end. The weapon, however, had done its job. The Voidborn, though still present, were severely weakened. Their numbers were decimated. Their ability to move between realities to consume was severely diminished. The tide of the war had shifted. The combined forces had prevailed. The remaining Voidborn were scattered and isolated, their threat diminished. The battle was over. The Krill and the humans had survived, and as the survivors regrouped, they took a collective breath. Praetor Lyra, after a moment of silence, spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "We have faced unimaginable evil. We have seen the destruction of entire civilizations. We have witnessed the power of the Voidborn, but we have also witnessed something else. We have witnessed the courage, the resilience, the unwavering spirit of humanity." She turned to look at the other members of the Krill delegation, her voice filled with respect. "We have seen their brilliance, we have seen their sacrifice, and we have seen the power of unity." The remaining Krill and humans, exhausted but victorious, began the long process of rebuilding. They had survived, but at a terrible cost. Many lives were lost, many worlds were destroyed. But as they looked out at the stars, they knew that they had achieved something extraordinary. They had faced the impossible, and they had won. But as the Krill and the humans celebrated their victory, they made a new discovery. As the sensor arrays began to settle, they picked up a faint, barely detectable signal emanating from the core of the galaxy. This wasn't a message or a warning or a request. This was a countdown, a complex series of data bursts, arranged in a precise, repeating pattern. The countdown was not to the arrival of the Voidborn, but to the awakening of something even more ancient, even more powerful. An entity that had slumbered for eons. And as the countdown neared its end, the Krill and the humans realized that they had not only won a battle, but also stumbled upon a terrible truth. They were not alone in the universe, and the war for survival was far from over. They watched the battle footage once more, and this time, the aliens understood what it meant to witness the power of a legend.